Hey, what's up, everybody? I'm Michael Woods, founder of Inclusive Sport Design. Welcome to the ISD podcast, where we talk all things inclusion in sport with amazing guests who are out there making inclusion happen. So you can learn and be inspired to make inclusion happen in your club or sport organization too. We are recording on beautiful Gundungurra country, and I'd like to acknowledge and thank the Gundungurra people, pay my respects to their elders past and present. Also pay my respects and welcome all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples and all other Indigenous and First Nations peoples who are watching or listening in today. Now, if you're new to the podcast or you're new to Inclusive Sport Design, I highly recommend you listen to episode 0. That's the introduction episode where you can find out more about who I am, what Inclusive Sport Design is all about, and what we hope to achieve with the ISD podcast. So I'll pop a link in the show notes so you can check that out. This is episode number 2. And today I'm with Lisa Drennan to learn how she is making inclusion happen across the USA for people with diverse abilities in the community, sport and recreation sector. So Lisa is an innovative inclusion leader. She's committed to building inclusive communities and demonstrated that over 38 years. She's been supporting people with disability and diverse abilities in the care, community sport, recreation, summer camps sectors across the USA, and through her business Merge Inclusion Consulting, she supports and advises a wide variety of community organizations, including over time YMCA, Boys and Girls Clubs, sports teams, leagues, scouts, schools, you name it, she's done it. She's also the Adjunct Professor of Adaptive Physical Activity at the University of Massachusetts in Boston. And she's the lead author of a really excellent resource called the Pathways to Friendship Toolkit for recreational community professionals. So an amazing, passionate and knowledgeable person who I'm sure you are going to learn a lot from. So let's get into it. Lisa Drennan, welcome to the Inclusive Sport Design podcast.
Thank you, Michael, for having me. I'm so thrilled, and hello to the audience. Thanks for tuning in and listening.
No worries. I'm super excited for this chat. We're going to cover a lot of ground, I feel, and we're going to create a lot of value for our listeners, hopefully, as well. But I want to just kick off with, if you could just tell us a little bit about where you are in the US.
I live a little bit south of Boston, Massachusetts, which is on the East Coast and the United States of America.
Awesome. And I know you've been doing some traveling lately.
Yeah.
All over the place, right?
Yeah, I've been to Vermont. I got home yesterday from California. I'm heading to New Hampshire tomorrow and then to Colorado and all over. So I'm really having a busy spell right now, but I love it.
That's it. That's because inclusion has to happen everywhere. So we've got to go everywhere.
Yep. And I will.
That's it. And so tell us a little bit about kind of your backstory. How did you get into working in inclusive sport and recreation and community inclusion and things?
Yeah. So when I was 17 and a half, I started working at a residential community, and it's near where I live in Pembroke, Massachusetts. It's called New England Village. So I was what's now called a DSP, or a direct support professional. I think they just called it staff back then. So I really worked from the ground up, boots on the ground, working with folks with intellectual developmental disabilities, became very interested in recreation within that organization, was the rec for a while. And then I helped to design and help in the building planning process, and to open the Solar Wellness Center. And that was on the campus. So that was designed specifically for this population. And we had a pool and fitness and music and art. So that's where my whole recreation kind of love and passion of knowing how important it was for this population came about. From there, I spent 30 years working there. And then I went to, 30 years. It was I grew up there, basically. And that's where I learned everything that I learned. And I went to my local YMCA, and I was the first ever director of inclusion for our association. So it's called, the South Shore. So it was all south of Boston area. And my whole kind of view of what inclusion means just blew totally up. And I understood it a lot better. I used to work just with folks who worked with this population. Now I'm working with someone who is a camp counselor, someone who works the front desk, someone who's a Zumba instructor, and I'm teaching them
There's a
how to
shift,
work
right,
it.
between
Total
kind of
shift.
working in the disability services community sector to working in kind of mainstream
Yeah,
and then servicing and supporting those audiences inside a mainstream setting,
absolutely.
right?
And that was the huge aha moment for me. I really understood that in order for inclusion to work, we need to teach the rest of the world. But that's kind of how I felt. Like there's a whole, the community needs to be more comfortable to welcome, engage, and support folks with disabilities. So that was my huge aha moment. And I knew in short time that this was something that I wanted to do more of. I would help other YMCAs across the country, answer questions. We ran a resource group, and it was that kind of the ability to reach other communities and share my really unique background with them that I said, I'm meant to do this. So I started Merge in 2018.
Yeah, that
And
was kind of
yeah,
my next question, and it's a
yeah.
great segue into that. Tell me about Merge. Tell me about the work you're doing now, and
Yeah.
obviously that 30 odd years of experience has kind of been the catalyst for that, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So with Merge, I originally started working primarily with camp, recreation, sport organizations.
Hmm.
That was my experience. That was my interest, my passion. But soon I would get asked questions, oh, could you come work at the library and work with the scouts organizations here or
Hmm.
before and after school programs? And that, it made me realize. So now I just say community organizations, but
Yeah,
my experience and my passion is in that recreation sport arena, but I will work with any community organization. So that's one arm of my work. And then the other arm is going back to my roots, working with human service agencies and sharing with family members or self-advocates, persons with disabilities themselves and folks who work with this population. Here's what community inclusion is and what it isn't, and how can you access it? So I give them tips from being on the other side of the bridge. I often make that reference to there's a bridge that we need to be strengthening, right? And that's the disability community on one side, and then the other side is our community, right? And it's always gone one way. It's been a one direction bridge and it will never strengthen. So we need to strengthen that other side. And that's where I feel like it's really important for us to be thinking and working together, right? The disability
yeah,
community and the general community.
that's a really good point. I think, and I've been doing this stuff for a little while as well. So that idea of bridging the gap between mainstream, I guess, for want of a
Yes.
better phrase, and where our target audiences are. In this case, you're talking about people with disability in the disability and human care sector, where those two kind of spheres can intersect is where you can create genuine inclusion outcomes and genuine participation and connection, right? So you've got to play on
Absolutely.
both sides of the bridge, right?
You do. You do. And you
Yeah.
have to strengthen both sides.
Yeah.
I find it interesting that even within the disability community and those who support them, there's a misunderstanding about what inclusion is. They
Yeah.
usually default to specialized or adaptive sport, which are great. And that's a piece of inclusion, but it's not inclusion, or at least what I'm looking for. So
Yeah.
I'm
It's not the
always,
one option.
yeah, exactly. And I'm always pushing towards or helping an organization get towards authentic inclusion. So where persons with and without disabilities are participating side by side. And I value and I recognize that a specialized or an adaptive sport, for instance, are a value, but they shouldn't be the end all, right? We should always look for as much space as possible in our world that we can open up to being more inclusive side by side with community members. That's what I'm always looking for.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm,
Absolutely. So I want to pick up on your co-authoring of the Pun-Based Friendship Toolkit. And I've seen it. I
yeah,
think it's brilliant. I think the
thank you.
concepts and the approaches in it are amazing and really useful for not just engaging with people
Mhm.
with disability into community sport and recreation. It's a great resource for everybody. So
Thank
tell
you.
us about that and where did it come
Sure.
from?
Oh,
How's that going?
I'm so proud of it. A wonderful resource that I did in partnership with the ARC of Massachusetts. So ARC is a human service agency that supports individuals and families with persons with disabilities. And for Massachusetts, each state has their own, ARC is the name, ARC, and each state has their own kind of statewide initiative. And for the ARC of Massachusetts, they have a project called, it's Widening the Circle, Pathways to Friendship. So this project has been going on for years, even before they met me. And I know that they are focused on knowing how important friendship is to achieving belonging and being a community member. Friendship between a person with and without a disability is, that's the key focus of this particular initiative. And they originally wrote 4 toolkits, but the target audience for their first 4 toolkits were persons with disabilities, those who support them, teachers, family members. That was the target audience. Here's how you can help the person you support to have the opportunity to gain a mutual reciprocal friendship in where you go to school, where you work, where you play, where you live, right? So if it's an adult from the group home perspective. So when I met that group, when I was starting Merge, we're all kind of in the same circle, I sat down and told them what I was doing, I work with the other side of the bridge or the rest of the world. And I think for them as well, there was a huge aha moment that, oh, we should write one for the rest of the world. That was the idea behind it, that the target audience for this 5th toolkit is the community organization. So if, say, you received a copy and you're reading it and this is wonderful, and maybe you're supporting somebody with a disability to try to get out into the community, you would use that as a tool and say, go to your local sport organization or scouts or whatever community organization you're looking to engage, and say, here's a wonderful tool for you. First, you're going to learn what inclusion is and what that means. We're going to, really look into the hurdles that you might face and then how to solve them. And then once that's down pat, we go to the friendship work and thinking about how can we create more spaces where a person with or without disabilities might be participating in something together. So maybe they're on the same rugby team or they're taking an art class together, right? In a fishing club or a book club, right? And then as the person who's running that group or activity, how you can hone in on helping, not in an unnatural way, right? It's not like a force, but it's more just being aware, like, hey, Bob, did you happen to know that Rick is also really into NASCAR racing? And then you just kind of let, whatever happen there. But it's just being a little bit more mindful and intentional about creating opportunities for a reciprocal mutual friendship to occur.
Yeah, because I think research tells us that some of the main motivators and benefits of sport and recreation participation for everybody is the ability and opportunity to create friendships and the social outcomes that come from that. And people with disability are no different to any other segment of the population.
Absolutely.
And a lot of times, particularly in the mainstream sports setting, where you're delivering services and programs and activities and club opportunities and things that are inclusive, we don't always think about, well, how do we actually foster the ability for these people to make friends and to build genuine connections and stuff? We just assume it'll happen. And if it doesn't happen, we just, we have no kind of thought process around why, right? But so this resource and this area of work, I think, is really, really interesting. And, for the audience at home, Lisa and I teamed up over a year ago now, and we produced a little masterclass on this very subject. It was actually before you finished that resource, I think, as well, or around the same time. I'm not sure. I can't remember. It's been a whirlwind couple of years. But that masterclass is still available if anyone is interested and think that it can be helpful for them and they're interested in this idea. We'll put links to stuff in the show notes so you can check it out. Sure. But it's really useful. The framework that you use is really practical and really easy to understand. And I think, bring a huge amount of benefit to people.
Sure.
Because friendships and social connections and stuff are really beneficial and really supportive of inclusive environments. If you feel welcome, you've got a reason to keep going back because your friends are there. You're a step ahead. So
you belong. And sport and recreation, that's the ideal platform for this to occur. Because there are you're not being measured or you're in this class or intelligent quotas or anything like that. It's like, hey, I love this sport or I love this activity and I'm doing it side by side with other people who also love it. And that's
That's right.
a win. That's the perfect kind of a space to be thinking about developing friendship. I mean, where are most of our friends made, right? I think about that. Where have I made my friends? Oh, we were on this club together, this team together. We met doing this activity together. We like going hiking. We do this together, right? So that's natural.
Yeah, that's right. And it goes the other way as well. You know, you might make friends at work or you might make friends at, your local church or, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And when you get social, what do? You go do something physical. Maybe you join a sports team together. Maybe, those things, it's both ways. So yeah, hugely important, but we don't think about how it works. So really great resource and well done on getting that out in the world. I want to shift gears a little bit and it's kind of a big, broad question, but what do you think some of the things that throughout your years of experience, what do you find makes a real difference to creating opportunities for successful inclusion outcomes in sport and rec? Big question.
Yeah, no, it is. And here it comes, right? I love this question because I think what most people don't think about when they think about successful inclusion is it takes organizational commitment. That is the bottom line. First thing that I say, it's my number one principle of inclusion, that you can't look at it as, oh, we hired so-and-so, the staff member that's great with this population, or we have this program for them or an event for the disability population. It has to be an organizational commitment from the top down. Everybody's involved. So it really, that's a key. That's one of the keys to once they understand that it's, if you're a CEO or executive director, you can't just, we'll hire somebody and they'll make some, inclusion programs. It doesn't work that way. Every single person in the organization, be it, boots on the ground, a volunteer, the president, board of directors, they all have to understand what inclusion is and isn't. And then everybody has a different role. So I think that's, key. And that I learned that from the Henderson School, and it's in Boston, and it's a fully inclusive school. I believe, I'm not quite sure 100%, but I believe it was one of the first, named inclusive schools. And that I heard the principal from there, the executive director, I'm not sure what his title was, but that's what he was speaking about, is that every person in our school, everybody is keyed in on making inclusion work. So that's a big one for me. I think, when I start working with an organization, and we have to delicately address if there are specialized or adaptive sports, there's a place for them, but there's a misconception. Oh, we're inclusive. We have special this class over here, right, for them. And that's the point where I really have to start educating and making sure people know that if there are specialized or adaptive programs, that they are a gateway in, and then we work toward full inclusion whenever possible, set by choice. And that's always the key. It has to be by choice. So you may have an athlete that wants to swim but needs a specialized class. Great. But they might also want to play basketball and they don't need it. They want to be on a typical basketball team. So we want to honor that, but always moving towards full inclusion. I think that's a big one as well. And I think and this is developing stronger every day, every presentation, every training that I do, the thought of focusing on somebody's strengths, their values, what makes them shine, right? That's keys, because so often when we see or are aware of a person with a disability, we focus on the challenges they have, or the behaviors they might have, or the issues, or the, what's going to be difficult about having them on the team. And I think, let's pull back that curtain and get to know that person and know what makes them shine. Because when you identify those strengths, right? And when you identify potential, this could be a potential lead for somebody. Oh, you're a fabulous artist, right? It could open somebody's mind like, oh, I am an artist, right? Or, wow, what a tremendous goalkeeper you are. That's a great job there. Then somebody has a purpose and a role. in a socially valued role within the club, the team, the organization. So I think that those are, real key elements that I try to have any organization that I'm working with understand right out of the gates.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. That's so true. All of those things, and the idea that you need that organizational commitment is so important.
Mm.
We actually spoke to Jason Webber, who's at the Football Wales, National Federation of Football in Wales, and he's leading their diversity, inclusion, equity strategy work there. And he talked about the need for, the whole of their organization, people and stakeholders at all levels of structure, trying to, follow the, get on the bus and follow that lead and be part of that solution. Everyone has a role to play.
Yeah.
But then their strategy is informed by the opinions, inputs, and experiences of the audiences that they're talking about and the audiences they're trying to engage with. And that includes a whole range of different audiences, including people with disability. And so organizations, small community clubs, all the way through to peak sporting organizations or sport or community organizations, it's the same. The mentality is the same, right?
Yeah.
You've got to be committed, then you've got to have a plan, and it's got to be informed by the people you're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And the disability community has to be at the core and the center of it.
Absolutely. Thanks for that. That's a huge amount of value in just that one little section there. So
sure,
we could probably wrap things up and move. No, we won't though. We'll keep going. You predominantly in your work in and around people with disability, people with intellectual and developmental delay type impairments and disability as well. So how do you go about connecting with this group of people in the community? How do you understand their needs? And in that journey over the years, was something that's maybe stood out as surprising or unexpected, or something that you really had a different concept of? And I know you've had a few aha moments over the years, but specifically working with this group of people, what sort of experiences have you had there?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, when we think about connecting to this community, the first thing we want to know is that we're reaching them, right? I was speaking to a recreation. So each town has, generally in the United States, a town recreation department. And I was working with the recreation department. They're like, hey, we built this program and this other adaptive program, this specialized program, and nobody came. And I asked about their marketing. So are you reaching them? That's the first thing. Are we reaching the audience? Because just simply putting it on your brochure or putting it on your website, if that population is not even thinking that, if you have not had a history of being inclusive and you're not being thought of as, oh, that town or that organization is really good at inclusion, nobody would be looking at your brochure anyway. So I think we have to reach them. So that's where the good partnership, if we go back to thinking about a human service agency like an ARC, in the Massachusetts. And that's one of my first things. Connect with your local ARC. Let them know what you're doing because they can share with their families, and then you get them connected. So you have to reach them. And I think it's so important, and we fail to do this a lot, is think about what is the message when I go on a website for an organization? Do I see pictures of people with and without disabilities, right? And not always, and this is the important part, say somebody has an adaptive program, well, they always get that stock photo of somebody in a wheelchair or someone with Down syndrome, right?
On top of the hill with the sun rising in the background.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, exactly. Oh, those photos, somebody needs to, fix that. But that's another story. But anyway, does your website, any kind of social media that you have reflect that your community, right? And for persons with disabilities that are visible, are you seeing that in photos, but not just for your special programs or adaptive programs, in your general, welcome to the YMCA, and you should see that. And the language should be accurate, right? So that we're using proper terminology as well. So that's key. Just reach them. Because I think, and I've heard from families, once I saw, this picture or heard this or this language, I knew they were serious about it. So then they would probably connect. So you connect with them, you get them in the door, right? So, and then once they're in the door, I think one of the most important steps is doing, an intake process, for lack of a better word, particularly in camp, right? So it's really getting to know that camper or that, sport participant, athlete, what have you. And I think what's really important, this is one of my number one tips that I share with organizations. So in your intake process, the first question should be, or the first thing that you ask is something positive, right? Because if you were to interview, say, 10 parents right now and say, tell me about your child. And if it's a parent of a child with a disability, generally they're going to start with, oh, my child has this disability, this diagnosis, this behavior, this problem. And we have to stop putting that on the parents, right? We have to stop doing that. And we have to say, what makes your child shine? What are they awesome at? What do they love to do? And then can you imagine a parent reading that and going, wow, never done that before. So let's start, right? And then you're starting on the right foot of, we want to know your child. And we'll work on accommodations and modifications and what challenges they might have.
Everyone's different anyway, right? So you're not going to, understanding if someone's got autism isn't going to tell you.
No.
The specifics of that particular person, right? And every person who says I have autism is going to be a different set of circumstances. So listeners at home, audience at home, don't focus on the impairment as the first port of call. That's
absolutely
not going to get you far. Going to get to know the person.
Yeah, I even say, I'll say it out loud in a training. I don't care what somebody's diagnosis is. Does not even matter to me. What I do care about is what do we need to know to help that child, that teen, that adult to be successful in this setting, right? And that's what I want to know. I don't have to, get a whole history book on, diagnosis and this and that, because like you said, it doesn't matter. One child with autism, one child with autism, right? Everybody's different. Right. Yeah. And I could never, sometimes, I don't know if you get answers, can you come and, just teach us about all the disabilities? And I'd never be able to do that. No, I want you to just learn about Joey or Samantha or, so that's who you're going to learn from. So it would be Joey or Joey's parents if he's young, right? So that's what we want to focus on.
No, that's so true. I remember when I first started doing kind of inclusion trainings and workshops and stuff. And I would get up and do this disability inclusion kind of workshops and talks and stuff. And pretty much the first thing I'd say is I'm not going to tell you anything about disability that you can't get from a textbook, right? Because I'm not an expert in impairment and we're not going to focus on that stuff. If you want to know that, ask the person. And that's filtered through. And I know a really great colleague of mine over the years and an amazing person here in Australia, Wendy Ross, he's done a lot of work in the learn to swim and coaching space over here. She talked about people with disability and the coaching of people with disability as just a body in water. And our goal with the body in the water is to make it as efficient as possible from getting from one end of the pool to the other. And you do whatever you need to do to make that possible for the person. So the impairment and diagnosis actually is far, far secondary to just understanding how the person thinks, how the body works, and how you can optimize that for people. And you take that lesson to any activity about
anything,
put the deficits to the side. Don't worry about that. Let's focus on capabilities. What's positive? What do you want to do? And where do you want to go? And let's work together to get there, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And then you see a side of that person, and you can connect with them.
Let's move on. I want to ask about, you mentioned in there that the need for strong relationships and things in order to make things happen. So what's your advice for building strong community networks and partnerships that support your inclusion goals?
Yeah, it's such a great question. It's really important too. I think I might have mentioned this, but it bears repeating. When you are building a connection with a community organization, right, or someone who supports folks with disabilities, they have to be on board with understanding inclusion too. I find that in more cases than not, folks who work with people with disabilities misunderstand inclusion. Their idea is, oh, sure, we go to that special bowling night down the street. We go there. Yeah, that's included. It's in the community. So being physically in the community does not mean you're members of the community. And we need to move from the in the community to of the community. That's where real inclusion, like being side by side, rather than having a special bowling league, look to say what bowling leagues already exist and can we join them, right? So there's education that has to happen on that end, because often, again, I'll tell another story. I had a rec department I was working with. They're doing great stuff. They're really they're focusing on inclusion and not some. When you move away from building, inclusion programs or special programs to more, how do we build a culture of inclusion? That's what you want. And when I had a great recreation program doing great work in that area, and then they reached out to their local, an agency that supports folks with disability, and said, "Oh, this is what we have." And their response was, "Can you make like a special needs soccer clinic? We need a special needs soccer clinic." And it was like, wow, okay, so we got to go over there and teach them, because that,
Yeah.
if you think about disability history, that's what, everything has always been separate or segregated.
Mhm.
And so we have a lot of work to do on both sides of that bridge. So yeah, that networking is important, but both sides of that bridge have to be educated and working towards the same goal and not falling into old habits, that, oh, this is what it is. It's a special program. It's not always.
Yeah. And that probably leads us to a question around kind of that education that is required and the process of is building that knowledge, which is something that clearly you spend a lot of time doing and you do quite well. Why is that important? Why is it important to do that, spend that time in building that education and building that awareness and changing perspectives to achieve the outcomes that you're looking for an organization? Like
Yeah.
it's probably covered it, but I'd like to go into it a little bit deeper, because I think people kind of think about inclusion training as kind of what we talked about before, just learning about disability or just learning about how to adapt
Mm-mm.
activities, which is part of it, but it's not all of it. And it's not necessarily the most important part of it. So
Mhm.
yeah, give me
Yeah.
your thoughts on that.
Yeah. So I think, and I briefly said it earlier, move
Mm,
away from programs to culture. And when you
mm,
start thinking about culture, right, that's what you want in an organization. How are we going to change the culture here so that there's intentional work in everything that we do, from, oh, we're going to be building a new, children's area. Okay. So do you have your inclusion lens on? Like, that's what you want to be happening. So if there is an inclusion person, fantastic. That person should be in a consulting role, not a doing role. You can't just say, we're all set. Oh, good. We checked that off our box. We hired somebody. They take
yeah,
care of that. It doesn't work that way. So, or at least successful inclusion. So you really want to, just to build that strong organizational commitment, educate both sides of the bridges. And I think what's really important to do at this point is to tell stories and show what's possible. Because I think through stories, and I did that a lot in the toolkit, I showed, here's Matthew and Eric, right? And here's a friendship, because people wouldn't think about, oh, I didn't even know that was a thing, or that we had to do this, or that's even possible to be a friend with somebody with disabilities. Don't they have their own staff? That kind of, we have to break away from that. And I think the way we do that is by telling stories as much as possible and showing what's possible. That's the key. Show what's possible. So when I have I have this great YMCA near me that I work with, and they are just hitting it out of the park. They're doing awesome work. They're eliminating inclusion programs from their language, and they're just saying, we're an inclusive Y.
yeah,
That's what I want to hear. They do have programs that are specifically designed for a certain population. That's great. That's just part of what they offer. So they're hitting it out of the ballpark. So when I'm working with a Y that just isn't getting it, or they're not imagining how this could work, I ask them to, hey, let me put you in touch with this YMCA, and they can share a little bit of their thoughts, or, I'll share a podcast that I did with them where they can hear them say it. This is the journey we're on. And we're never done with that journey too. So
yeah,
they'll say that you can't just, it's not a checkbox that, oh, we did that training once, or we had Lisa come and she did a training. We're all good.
yeah.
It's not
That's
it.
right.
Inclusion's always happening.
I think that's so important, and so many
Mhm.
times over the years where you've kind of, work with a new organization, or you're looking to set something up new somewhere and you want to get people on board. Oftentimes it's them seeing it.
Yeah.
Ideally
Yeah.
firsthand, they're coming to an activity that is what you're aiming to deliver,
Yeah.
and they go,
Yeah.
oh, now we see what we can do. And they kind of jump on the bus then, but
Yeah.
which is one of the reasons why I've set up the Inclusion in Action video series. If anyone's seen those, there's a couple of videos out there now. We're about to, at the time of this recording, organizing our third video, but that's all about showing what it looked like and putting the experiences of the participants at the center of that story so that you can see what works and how you can do things. Because there's no one size fits all approach. There's no one way of doing it. There's lots of ways, but the framework is people at the center, designed to their needs, and then let's tell the world. And that's kind of what we're aiming to do there. So bringing that into your education and training is really important. The other thing I really love, Lisa, is inclusion's not a program. Programs can be inclusive, but inclusion's not a program. It's about organizational and systemic culture change and a journey towards improvement on an ongoing basis. Like that's so amazing. So let's talk about activities then, because we have, that's an important part of all of this. And we talk about showcasing some of that. So what do you think in terms of planning activities? What does an inclusive sport activity look like? And how do you go about kind of making the adaptations and modifications that are necessary for participants?
Yeah, a great question. And this is where I would start and share. I have strategies that I teach, right? And I use this kind of statement: in all, for all, by all, right? So these strategies need to be used in all settings. Okay. So it would mean everything from when your doors open or your, practice starts to the end of the day, or if it's a camp, it would mean in all settings. So the red group and the blue group. And if the green group's like, we don't have to do this, or your kids are teenagers, or we don't have anybody here, there. No, the rule is in all, because that's what you want. So you want to be using inclusive strategies in all settings, and then by all. And by all means by every staff member. And that's the key, that when I go in and work with an organization, if I'm working with, instructors or camp counselors, everybody needs to be trained on how to use these, not just, this staff and this staff's really good at it, so why don't you sit down and talk with them? It's not going to work that way. And then for all. And then for all, number one means for all kids, right? Not just, the easier ones that we can deal with. It means we make it work for all kids, right? So, or teens or adults, no matter what you're working with. And then the other part of that for all is that you're using those inclusion strategies for all kids or teens or adults or athletes, not just, hey, everybody with autism, come on over here. We're going to go over a visual schedule together. You're using it because it's based in universal design principles. They work well, and they're going to help all of your athletes, your kiddos, your campers, your teens, whoever you're working with. It's going to be successful for all. So I think that's like the key, is to just have that be something that becomes part of your culture in your day.
I love that. It's such a simple way to think about it, and it gives you those cues to address all of those things. Because sometimes, we kind of just think about each individual person and each individual needs, and maybe one coach thinks about it, or one instructor thinks about it, or they only think about it when the kids turn up. But that gives you a bit of a process, so that everyone takes responsibility, right? And everybody has a role, and we think about that for every participant that you might have, not just the kids with the individual special needs.
Absolutely.
You think about that as a process for everyone. That's so valuable.
Yeah.
And that sets you up for some successful activity, right? It keeps everyone participating.
Yeah.
So I like to always think about the next step for participants when we're talking about activities and inclusive programs and things. And I know that's sort of important to you as well. So, and I guess the importance of this question, or the importance of this kind of idea, is that a lot of times, like we've spoken about, when programs are delivered in that specialized model, whether they're in the community or they're separate from the community in an institutional setting, for example, oftentimes they're sort of a closed bubble. Things happen in there, and you might stay in that activity for ever until you decide not to, for example. And so there tends to be a little connection between a specialized program and what else might be available, what other opportunities or pathways might exist. And we know in sport in particular,
Mm.
there are pathways for people, whether you're starting at a community level and you're just learning basic skills or social activities, there are next steps available in a whole range of things. So how do you kind of look at that kind of linking of people to other options and next steps in the sport and recreation sort of pathway? And that could include things like volunteerism and employment and education and stuff as well, right? It's not always just progressing to the next level of competition. It's a whole range of stuff. So tell us a bit about that.
I think the best example I can give, I was mentioning that YMCA that I'm working with, that's doing great work. And I asked them to tell me, think about your best member at the YMCA and what makes them the best member. Like the person that, if you were going to have somebody come interview, like why it's wonderful to be at this YMCA, who do you think of? And so let's break that down. Oh, Bob, he's fantastic. Tell me about Bob. Oh, he welcomes everybody. Oh, he volunteers for every time when we have that fundraiser in the spring fundraiser activity. He's there volunteering. Oh, he even came to a board meeting and shared his story. And, you go on and on. You identify what are those key attributes or elements that you're looking for in a great member. And then that's the bar or the goal that we should set for folks with disabilities as well, right? Not just come in and do a class. How do we get them more to be part of a member? So when there is a special event for family members on Friday night and it's a movie and popcorn thing, do they know about that as well? Making sure that they're informed about other opportunities and ways to engage with other members of the YMCA community. So it could be, a fun family event. It might be a fundraiser, or it could just be, open mic night, whatever. Those other ways that a member who gets really involved and that about more than just that program that I do, right? So it's when you move away from thinking about a program and you think about the culture. So we should always be striving for that. What makes a great member? And that, I think that's the difference when you look at it that way and say, oh yeah, that's what we want. And, perhaps they volunteer. We're looking for volunteers. We have a road race coming up. We need somebody to, man the water table. Can you help out there? That's what we want. And employment. And that's a big piece of what once I get the whole, inclusion trainings underway, then I'm like, let's talk about your hiring practices, and meaningful. And that's the big thing for me with hiring, not just, we'll create a little job opportunity here and somebody can wipe all the tables down. No. It's the same thing. What is that person good at? What do they love? Maybe they love, planting and flowering. They can become part of the landscape crew, right? That's what you want to look for. And you do the same thing. You would apply the same kind of, for supervisors or peers, the same inclusive type strategies. And then if accommodations needed, you provide that to help the person to be successful. But you find the right match for the right person and have them, be a member of your team, right? Like literally as an employee. And that's what we have to think about too. Really opening our eyes and reaching the disability community to let them know we have job openings and that we will accommodate. Maybe there's a process for interviews and they would make an accommodation if it's someone that, with a neurodiversity that wouldn't do well in a typical type of interview sure. Okay, we can do it this way. We'll do it typewritten, right? If that makes it easier for you.
Let's jump to the fun part of our chat here, which is our quickfire questions, which we're trying to do with all of our guests. And stick around because the last one is some more inclusion tips. So stick around if you're thinking about hitting pause. But the first one, Lisa, who's your favorite athlete right now?
Definitely right now, Chris Nikic. Do you know about him? He's that young man, triathlete, just completed an Ironman in Kona Ironman, and he's a young man with Down syndrome. He's from Florida. And I have been watching him for many years now. Yeah. And I watch his training schedule, routine, and how hardcore, right? He is hard. I mean, Kona is the hardest, the Ironman, and he completed it just last week. So fantastic. I just admire him as an athlete. I think he's fantastic. And he has this, his kind of driving quote is 1% better. I seek to be 1% better every day. And if I, am falling short on this time, I just want to do 1% better. And he encourages everybody to do that. So he's just an amazing athlete. I'm so impressed.
Nice. Love it. We'll try and put some links to him in the show notes because the bloke's a legend.
Yeah.
Favorite sports team?
Good question. I would have to say any team that I've been on with other females. There's just something so bonding. I played soccer with, a bunch of women, and now I lead mountain bike rides at times with other women. And that team is my favorite team, so whatever I'm doing at the time or watching any women's sport, because, more power. That's what I think.
Nice. Any women's sport. Love that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, related potentially, what's your greatest sporting achievement? Either on the field, maybe with soft field, maybe doing, I don't know, a big mountain bike ride, or off the field?
Yeah. Well, my last mountain bike ride race that I did, I crashed. So we're not going to talk about that. It's not good. And I still hit, my leg is still healing. So, I will share. I don't know if you have these in Australia, whoever's listening in their neck of the woods, but Go Ruck. Have you heard of that?
Go Ruck.
Yeah. It's one of those, athletic endurance trainings, and it's based off of special force.
We've got probably Tough Mudder is one over here.
Similar, it's one
sort of
step up.
Obstacle races and stuff over in mud and under barbed wire and stuff like that.
Tough Mudder was my beginning, I've done all that. Tough Mudders. I've done
tougher than Tough Mudder.
It's tougher than Tough Mudder. So what you do is you show up 9:00 at night. I did it on March 18th. This was my big achievement.
At night?
Yep. Backpack on with 20 pounds of weight in the backpack. And I happened to pick March, and it was freezing. It was 24 degrees and 15 degrees Celsius with the wind chill factor. And you do boot camp style activities, everybody push up, this, that. Your backpack can't touch the ground. And if it does, the whole team has to do 40 burpees. And we went, I think we did 17 miles. We went 12 hours. And you do all these other challenges in the middle, like, hey, there is a telephone pole. You pick it up and carry it. But to be honest, it was it almost broke me. It was really a struggle.
I can imagine.
I almost quit. When I showed up, when, we're all getting out of the car, I don't know who signed up for this. And I got out of the car and I looked around and I went, look left, look right. Everybody was in their 20s and 30s, and I'm not. And I was like, hey, what did I do? What do I do? I fell close to, about halfway through the night. I really struggled. I slipped on ice. I was carrying a sandbag. That's the other thing. Yeah. And they could carry all this stuff. And I was crying. And I'm just like, I can't do this. The sergeant who was in charge, his name's he's a cadre, but I called him Sarge. And he said to me, and this is my unexpected lesson of inclusion. And he said to me, Lisa, people our age have paid our dues. We do not have to participate like everybody else. And then he started talking to me about my values. I see that you're very positive. You're really encouraging. You watch out for safety. You're, blah, blah, blah. That's what you need to focus on. Stop trying to keep up and carry everything and do exactly what these 20 and 30-year-olds are doing, and just focus on that. And then he asked, so he's kind of, the goal is everybody finishes. So even if they had to drag me, they were going to make me finish because that's the goal. And he said to me, what do you do? And this was in March, right? When I started Merge. So I had that elevator speech already, and I'm like, so I work with community organizations and I teach them how to include in people with, diverse abilities and how to make modifications. And then I'm thinking, make modifications and accommodations. And you look at people's strengths and their valued parts of the team. And then I just laughed out loud. I said, I do what you just taught me. You just taught me inclusion. I just experienced what it was like to feel like I'm not part of the team. I'm not, they're going to kick me out. I'm not going to make it. And when he
Mhm.
focused on my values and what I brought to the team and allowed me to just participate differently, not that I was participating worse or better, or I didn't deserve to be on the team, just differently. And I made it. So I made
Yeah,
the whole thing. I made it through and I learned a big lesson that day. So that's my big achievement. Yeah.
that's amazing. That's such a cool
Yeah.
story.
And
That's I was expecting to hear, oh yeah, no, I got halfway through the night and they gave up and I went home, jumped in
I
bed.
I almost called an Uber. I was literally like, can I get my phone
I
out without
can't
him
walk.
seeing? And I'm like, kind of like, what's the price for an Uber from something? You know what I'm kind of going? And I mean, it was so cold. I was crying a couple times because it just hurt so much. Everything hurt and it was so pain. It was difficult until I let go that I had to compete with everybody else. But tears were freezing on my face. And I was like, "Oh, it hurts.
That's
Everything hurts." It was just painful. But once I had my chat with him and the whole team, and for a little while, somebody else carried my backpack to just let me get back and composed and ready. And then around 6 a.m., I was like, I got this. And then the next 3 or 4 hours, I did it. So it was good. And it felt good. I really learned a lesson on inclusion. Like,
that's an incredible lesson. And for any coaches out there who are thinking, oh, what's inclusion all about?
yeah.
There's a story to tell you that if you're a good instructor, a good coach, or a good leader,
Yeah.
by default, you're inclusive because you focus on the person and the values and their capabilities first, right?
That's great. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's great. That's great. Let's crack on with our quick fires. What's the first thing you do when you get up in the morning?
Oh, all right. So when I get up, I check the time and then I mathematically go, well, how many more minutes can I really sleep before I have to get yeah. So that's my first thing. And I'm like, all right, I can sleep 5 more minutes. And I said, I think 6 sleep. But then when I'm ready to go, I get up, I drink a full glass of water, I get dressed and I take like a boot camp class or PRX or something like that. So Monday through Friday, pretty much I'll take some type of class most days. So, 3 or 4 days a week at least. And then on the weekends, I'll go biking, hiking, something like that. But it's always get up, drink a big glass of water, go get going and go work out. So that's
That's
yeah.
putting me to
Yeah.
shame.
That's
I'd be likely
what
to
I
just
love.
roll over and not get up. But
That's it.
that's fatherhood for you, so that's all good.
Mm.
And finally, and I don't know if we can get any more value out of you than you've already delivered. It's been an incredible conversation. But what's your best inclusion tip for our listeners? Something maybe we haven't covered yet.
Okay. Yeah. So I'm going to go with, because this is one of my favorite principles of inclusion. I call it let's get to success. So it's a mindset. So if anybody out there is listening, when you're presented with any type of challenge, a difficulty, oh, so-and-so is going to join your team and they have Down syndrome and a hearing impairment, right? What do we first do, right? Just as anybody in the community. Oh, no, that can't work. We start doing that. Oh, here's why it can't work. Here's why this might happen or this behavior, this problem. And everybody focuses on what can go wrong. And I just ask people to take that deep breath, switch that mindset. And instead of saying, no, we can't, if you put all your energies into how are we going to make this work? I think that inclusion is 85% mindset. I'll teach you the other 15%, this strategy to do, this policy, this procedure. It's all, if you think, how can we make this work? You got to make it work. And you just work with everybody around you. You just pull in other people and other minds and you figure out how we're going to make this work. So that's probably the most important inclusion tip that somebody leaves today, understanding that and takes that deep breath and switches their mindset. I think we're in good shape.
Yeah, I love that. I used it recently in a talk I did for swim schools up at the National Swim Schools Convention on the Gold Coast a few weeks ago. And it was interesting when you say that sort of thing, that particular line as well. And thank you very much I stole that from you. I wouldn't be able to make it as succinct as you, but it's one of the skills that you have. But when we had that conversation, half the room were like nodding, agreeing, vigorously in agreement, saying yes, absolutely. That's the start point. You just
We do
have that mindset. The other half were kind of like, had that aha moment of, oh, it's that simple.
It is that simple, right?
And then you talk about the details and the processes and tools and steps
Figure it out.
that might help you and support you in that. But if you
Yeah,
start from that point,
you're
then
good.
you're way ahead, right?
You're
So
good.
huge tip, huge tip. I love it.
Yeah.
Well, Lisa, that's probably our time. Thank you so much for all of the incredible work that you do and all of the value that you've given our audience today. Can you maybe share with everybody how they can kind of follow you, get in touch with you if they need to find out more?
Yeah, absolutely. The first thing I would say is jump onto my website, and it's mergeconsulting.org. And from there, you can sign up to get my monthly newsletter and see past newsletters. You can connect to my Facebook, my LinkedIn, and Instagram right there. But reach out to me by email as well. It's Lisa Drennan at mergeconsulting.org.
Awesome. We'll put all
Yeah,
that in the show notes as
sure.
well. Everybody, thank you for joining us today. I know a little longer than they probably originally planned, but I think you'll agree that it was well worth your time sticking around till the end.
Definitely. Definitely.
Such a good conversation. For everybody at home, make sure you head over to inclusivesportdesign.com as well. Huge amount of resources and tools and courses there for you, including the masterclass with Lisa. And I'll also just thinking I'll drop a freebie resource in the show notes as well, which is a support needs intake form, I guess. So it's just probably links back to some of the conversations we've had today around getting to know your participants. Got a little one pager there, completely free. You can use as you wish. So there'll be a link for that in the show notes. Make sure you hit subscribe, follow, do all those sorts of things so you don't miss an episode. And that's it for today. Lisa Drennan, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast.
Thank you, Michael, for having me. And thank you to the audience for sticking around and listening and raising up this important conversation around inclusion.